Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new JTV setup. So, Yom Kippur is just around the corner, and you may have thought to yourself, or perhaps heard someone else say to you, it feels a bit fake standing in prayer on Yom Kippur and resolving to do better, regretting things you've done when you know in your heart, I don't know how much I regret them, or maybe I do regret it, but I know I'm going to keep making those same mistakes and same errors. And you try hard and you're told by perhaps the rabbi or the books you're reading, or you're just reading into the prayers and thinking, my gosh, I just have to think all about the regrets and sins that I did over the past year and do my utmost to seem as regretful as possible in God's eyes so that he should bless me with a good year. And apart from this whole approach being frankly a bit depressing and a bit pathetic, um, the big question to ask in all of this is, where does serving God fit into all of this? Because if the whole day is about me just desperately pleading for mercy from God and hoping that he'll put me in his good books and I'll be spared from, not getting blessing, etc., then who am I serving? If the whole purpose of Judaism and religion is about serving God, isn't this just all about serving myself, apart from anything else? Apart from also being a bit depressing, just thinking about my needs, my spiritual and physical blessings, making sure that I'm in God's good books. And are you also really telling me that the whole of Yom Kippur, I'm just meant to think about the sins that I did over the last year? Is that really what the holiest day of the year is meant to be all about? Sadly, this is a very prevalent view. It's a view that I used to have for quite a while. And I think it makes Yom Kippur in some ways something that you dread. But it shouldn't need to be something that we dread, if only we just give things a little bit of a rethink. What is the day really about? We call it a day of kapara, Yom HaKippurim. Kapara means cleansing, an atonement. But that's actually a positive thing, to be cleansed, to be, have the slate clean, made sort of renewed. That's a good thing. And we're told that Yom Kippur is actually a happy day. It's not meant to be a day thinking just about sin and regrets. It's actually meant to be a day of great intimacy. It's actually the day when the Kohen Gadol went into, he was the high priest in Israel back in the times of the temple. He would go into the holiest of holies in the temple, which means that we were able to achieve a certain intimacy with God on this day. This is the day when God forgave the Jewish people for worshipping the golden calf. So it's actually a day of deep intimacy. Now, part of intimacy in a relationship means that you can have important conversations. If someone's important to you, you can discuss all the areas of your life in which you interact with them. And some of those things will feature regretting mistakes that you've made, things that you've done to hurt the relationship. But it's much broader than that. This is not about serving yourself to protect yourself. Anyone knows that when you try and have an intimate conversation with someone and talk about the good and the bad things in relationship, things you want to work on, it's not because you're desperately trembling with fear that you might get struck down, but it's because you care about the relationship and you want to be closer and intimate to your partner. So this isn't meant to be a day thinking all about the sins we've done alone. There's a much wider context, a much wider and beautiful and awesome gravitas here, which is that it's a day of being close to God. And yes, within that context, you will think about things you might regret in terms of how you might have, perhaps been a better servant of God in this world and been a better human being. But it's within the context of a relationship, not within the context of serving yourself. Another piece of added context, which is also really important, is that people can often really beat themselves up about their sins or the regrets they have, and can feel so bad and worried about it. It's also important to remember and think about and consider what God expects of us. We haven't heard from him face to face. We haven't heard God speak to us as a nation for over 3,300 years. The Jewish people have been through 2,000 years of tremendous turbulence in our exile and pain and national trauma. how much can God expect of us? We don't hear from him today. The world is, in some ways, it's very challenging to feel spiritually connected. Um, this is no way to try and justify any kind of action, but just to say we should have that added context as well of, how much does God expect of us? There's an idea that as we descend further and further away from Sinai and go through the generations, there's like a descending of the generations. We become a bit more spiritually disconnected from Mount Sinai. And people see that sometimes as like something to not necessarily beat us up about, but to say how weak we are and all the rest of it. No, it just means we have a different challenge. We are more down in the dirt of the physical world, and our challenges are different to that of our ancestors. We might not be able to reach the same spiritual heights, but then again, that's not what God expects of us. He's giving us a different task, where perhaps smaller wins on our part are in some ways great or greater than that of our ancestors, because it's just about the extent to which we pushed ourselves, given the context we're in. There's also something a bit challenging or even absurd about obsessing with your sins all day long and saying how much you regret them, when people say, I don't even know how much I do regret them, because if you feel so much regret, maybe you wouldn't have done it in the first place if it was that terrible to you. And it's really challenging to really feel like we can fully wholeheartedly regret certain sins we may have done, right? But a really helpful way of looking at it and thinking about it again within the context of relationship is not to spend the day thinking about all the sins you did over the past year, but rather who I sinned to. That is something you feel regretful. The fact that, yes, you enjoyed it and perhaps you might enjoy it again, but you can regret not so much the sin itself, but rather who you sinned to. The fact that your creator and his plan for you and for the world gets hurt, gets damaged by us not, us sinning, or us making poor decisions. And he might not blame us in the same way he might do previous generations, given that context I also said. But the point is that it still does hurt him, and it hurts his world when just objectively when a sin is done. And I think people can really resonate with that message, because it applies to human relationships too. You do something that you're perfectly comfortable with or you enjoy, but someone tells you it really upsets you when you do that. You might think to yourself, I don't have a problem with it, and it still would give me pleasure. But anyone can understand that, well, if it hurts you, I'm going to feel some level of remorse or regret, or that's something I feel I need to take into account. Not for protecting myself, but because it hurts you. And so it's so much healthier, more truthful, and awesome in a way, and something that ignites a sense of intimacy, to think about God's feelings and God's plan, and to make the day not about protecting yourself, but about my relationship with him. And to understand, I think sometimes people portray God as a sort of static, perfect, unfeeling being. We call God a living God because he's living. He has emotions. He can get, he is in some respects vulnerable to what we do, cares, because anyone that loves someone is going to be vulnerable to the actions of another. And so it makes much more sense to think about the question of regret and sin within the context of not how this has damaged me, but also, and more importantly, how this affects my creator, and making it about him. That's so much more healthy, and that's something I think people can far more easily relate to, and it feels far more authentic and far more constructive. And so we go on to Yom Kippur with the understanding that, okay, I may have certain wants, desires, but life's not just about me. And this today is not going to be a day about me and all my wants and needs and desires. I'm not here just to serve myself, but we actually fast and observe Yom Kippur to show for a day I'm actually not going to be so desperately connected to all my needs and preserving myself and serving myself. I'm going to refrain from food and actually just spend a day thinking about what's needed of me. And if you think about it, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to say I need to go to shul on Yom Kippur and fast because I'm so needy and in trouble. if we're created beings, we're created not because we're needy and in trouble and vulnerable, because we're needed by our Creator. And so we observe Yom Kippur not out of our need, but actually because our Creator, God, desperately needs to forgive us. Because he can't really blame us for what we did, in a sense, given our level of spiritual disconnect. But it still hurts. It still hurts his world. And so he says, please come on Yom Kippur so that I can forgive you, because I desperately want to, and I have a mission and purpose for all of you. And so let's talk about that on Yom Kippur. Let's have a much deeper and intimate conversation about how we can move forward. It's meant to be a constructive day, a happy day, a day in which we realign ourselves with our purpose and our deepest mission. And that's really what God is looking for. He's not looking to punish us and to scare us. So contrary to what a lot of people may think, we don't observe Yom Kippur to protect ourselves. That's not the primary motivation here. We do it because he needs us. Our Creator needs us to partner with him in this world. He wants closeness to us. And so I observe Yom Kippur in response to his desire, not mine. That's serving God. And that's a lot less burdensome. And so I want to wish you an easy fast, because we're not really meant to be thinking about our meals. We're just meant to take one day out where we say, when we're thinking about our life's mission and our relationship with our Creator, we don't want any distractions. So in that sense, I wish you an easy fast and a meaningful fast where you're not obsessed around guilt, around all the mistakes you made, but rather you can look at them within a wider context of moving forward and coming closer to your Creator and the mission that he needs of each and every one of you. I'm Ollie Annisfeld. You're watching JTV. I wish you all a happy, a healthy, and a sweet new year.